Recorded in beautiful Vancouver, Washington, this is the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra podcast, and I'm your host, Ashley Hall. This episode is part of our special series, VSO Encore, where we revisit pieces and performers from concerts past. In our second episode, I sat down with David Gould, the VSO's featured guest artist during performances on February 22nd and 23rd, 2020, at Skyview Concert Hall. Together, we discussed his time with the VSO and how he's staying inspired to make music during this difficult time. He also shared a few tracks he's recorded in the past, in addition to giving a special performance of a couple of solo pieces. Hi, David. How are you?
Hi, Ashley. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's so nice to talk to you again.
Yes, it is. It's a lot has happened since we spoke, since we were together in Vancouver.
Yeah, back in February. It feels like about 1,000 years ago, doesn't it?
It really does.
Speaking of which, what have you been up to since then?
Well, I was, pretty busy, and then boom, I hit a wall of reality that we all have kind of come into. After the last concert and all the festivities, I flew home and I had picked up my work with Van Doren, and at the same time I was doing playing clarinet and contrabass clarinet with the New York Philharmonic in a piece by Jörg Wiedemann called Babylon Suite, which I actually went to school for a semester or a year at Juilliard with Jörg. He had, I think, a Fulbright to come study. But he wasn't, sadly, he wasn't at the performance. It would have been nice to reconnect, but we did that and some couple little things, a couple rehearsals for things, and some little recording, and then I was all set to have a week off, and I went for Van Doren. I went to Indianapolis to the Music for All convention, which is an incredible event that happens for high school age students, where they have honor ensembles, but also groups go to be clinicianed, adjudicated. But there's no scoring. It's more all about tips and ways for students and music directors and band directors and things like that to learn and grow. So it's really a fantastic event. And the reason I was there is every year with Van Doren, we do a trip there because there's a emerging artist competition that I run for the company, where we have hundreds of applicants, and we choose a classical saxophone winner, a classical clarinet winner, and a jazz winner, which could be clarinet or saxophone. And we've commissioned works by young living composers to be premiered there. So we flew out, and we were to premiere a work by Joanne Harris for clarinet, cello, piano, and a piece for alto saxophone, cello, and piano by Wei Dai, and then even a big band composition by Sarah Giacovino with my three emerging artists. We Chance Stein on classical saxophone, Angel Mora on clarinet, and the jazz saxophonist this year was Santosh Sharma. And everything kind of fell apart while we were there. We were able to kind of to make a world premiere, at least video of each of the two classical pieces. The jazz piece it didn't happen. We ran out of time, and the festival ended early, and we were all sent home. And that's kind of when the new reality really hit for me, because from there we were just told to try to work from home, and then we actually even stopped that because non-essential work, obviously in these times, isn't essential, deemed by the powers that be. So we stopped, and we've kind of trying to do what we can to from the business side of things, trying to keep an eye on what's happening. But it's really quite a change for all of us. Really quite a shift to be from busy to all of a sudden, you're looking at the walls of your apartment and you're afraid to leave.
I know exactly what you mean. I think a lot of us are in that boat. Well, it sounds like you were keeping pretty busy up until that point, so that's good.
No, no, it's true. I mean, I'm sorry I went down that road, but it's just unfortunately it's the reality. I
No.
try to keep the rest more upbeat and not sad. I mean, this is a way for people to get away from their the reality as opposed to being dragged back in it. So I'm sorry.
No, no, not at all. I mean, that's we all know why we're here, but that's what, that's what this series is for, is to try to keep things going and keep things in motion even while we have to do things in a different mode.
Correct.
So, we were talking a little bit about when you were here in February. I think that our audience might be a little interested to hear about what it's like to come in as a guest performer. What happens during your time, if you've got any stories or interesting events that happened back then.
Well, I can tell you the everybody at the orchestra, the staff, the every single person made me feel so wonderful, so important. I felt like a star for the week that I was there, and it really, really incredible. I mean, to for people to be there to help you and want it to go well and succeed, it's really wonderful. I mean, it happens everywhere we go, but to be in front of the orchestra is a different feeling than being in the back of the orchestra. And something that was funny for me all the time, hearing the orchestra rehearse the other pieces, um, and I would be, either waiting or packing up, or it was strange for me because you're hearing the Strauss, and I've played the Strauss a few times, uh, and I felt like I was supposed to be on stage playing that, even when the concerto was just kind of in my mind. It's like, wait a minute, I'm missing it. It's what I would normally be playing. And in fact, while I was out there, I actually played a rehearsal of the Strauss. There was an emergency, and I actually had a clarinet with me for other reasons for the Maestro class. We'll get to that in a while. So I
Uh-huh.
sight read the second clarinet part of the Strauss. And it was a lot of fun, and it felt a little more normal on that side of the orchestra. But nonetheless, no, it was to be there from Salvador all the way through the orchestra and the administration. It really was incredible. It really really wonderful, and to be able to create a brand new piece of music with a whole orchestra was really really quite special. It's not something uh, clarinet players get to do all the time, and bass clarinet players as less. But it was really, really very special to hear it grow and have it come together and hear what was challenging to put together, or what was challenging kind of specifically in different spots or different players or different things like that. And it all came together beautifully, and we really, really was a week I will never ever forget. I will really cherish, because I was also involved in this with some of what I joke around I call the grown up stuff. You guys took me to meet with some board members and people who make contributions to the orchestra, and just to get to know different people and really share a love for music and the symphony, and specifically the Vancouver Symphony was really really incredible. Really, you guys have a wonderful community that I got to see about a lot of, that really made it a terrific week. And I think, judging by all the people that would speak to me at the intermission, in the performances, or the orchestra members that I would see before and after rehearsals and stuff, it seems like everybody really enjoyed the piece, and it was really a lot of fun working this all out. And but I have to say, when it was all done, the last notes played, it was kind of sad too, because
Mm.
at least 2 years of from the initial text message to my to Igor, to the last note of the performance. There was so much that went into it, and so many people and so many levels that we don't often see. As an orchestral musician, or you don't always see um, all the steps that go into the genesis, if you will, of a piece, and the development from everything aspect of programming, fundraising, marketing. As the clarinet player, I'm just used to showing up, trying to be prepared, and doing the best I can to play all the notes. But in this case, I was involved with many facets in a lot of different ways, and it was very interesting for me. And quite frankly, I really, really enjoyed it. The different
That
aspects.
does sound very interesting.
Yeah, no, it was really great. So, specific stories. I mean, I got to reconnect with some friends I hadn't seen in a long time. Well,
That's nice.
Igor Schachman and Salvador, I hadn't seen in New York since our initial phone calls and stuff. And William Blaney was down. He was playing in the orchestra up from Seattle. A friend from years and years ago, and no, it was really a remarkable time. I couldn't single out any one thing. The pre-concert talks with George were really fantastic and fun
Mm-hmm.
to be involved with that and um, listen and joke around and add, and it was really remarkable. You guys
Yeah.
did a great job out there.
Well, we try. I'm so happy that it was such a special experience for you.
Remarkable.
Well, you mentioned, some of the feedback that you were getting about the bass clarinet concerto. Do you recall any sort of specific things that people had to say, how it was received?
Well, it's funny. Some people came up and said, "My gosh, I played the bass clarinet in junior high, and it never sounded like that," which is fun. But it was nice to see that there were people that knew of the instrument that came and heard it, and there were plenty of people that said, "I had no idea a bass clarinet ever existed," or "I didn't know a bass clarinet could do all that," and all these things. I left really feeling like I did something special for the instrument and the instrument's notoriety, if you will, or just it's on people's radar now. It wasn't, I didn't record something that went mega viral and all that sort of stuff, but just there seeing the probably 3, 4, 5,000 people that had something that came and heard it over the time, the different concerts and things. I think that was really remarkable to me, to really help to help this instrument to move to the forefront.
Absolutely. When do you think you'll have the chance to play it again?
Oh, I have no idea.
Right.
I would love to play it again. It's such a great piece, so incredibly accessible and beautiful and challenging and exciting. I really don't know. If there are any conductors or orchestra people listening to this podcast and would like to do it again, oh yeah, have bass clarinet will travel. It it things. I was talking with friends and well, talk to your conductor friends, and I'm like, well, who has lots of conductor friends? I mean, I've got a couple I know, but the reality is, it's you might even talk, but then they have to convince their management and things like that. But please, if anybody has that ability or desire, um, talk to whoever you can, because it's a wonderful piece of music that really truly should get played more often.
Well, I certainly agree.
Thank you.
You had mentioned a bit ago the in-school performance that you did for the students.
Yeah, there were two educational things that we did while we were out there. We did a master class at Beacock Music, which was really, uh,
Hmm.
really remarkable. We could talk about in a minute, but to perform the third movement of the concerto as it was not quite finished being rehearsed, I might add. Uh, but it's amazing what happens when the lights go dim and the spotlights come on, and you really have to pull it together. The orchestra did beautifully, uh, and we really gave two wonderful performances of that third movement, which is very tricky.
Hmm.
For the music people listening, alternating between regular, 4 and then 5/8 and 7/8 times can be a little tricky, and it was really really great fun. And I think we gave two very good readings of it, and to have all those kids who were at the edge of their seats throughout the whole program. I would watch a little bit from the wings, seeing them. They were super well behaved and obviously very interested in what was happening in front of them. It was encouraging. Things like this is where we develop and create the next generation of listeners, really. It's where we come up with people that will hopefully come to concerts later in life, or they'll have the memories of this concert they went to and saw. Um, and they'll be interested in supporting music, hearing music, playing music, of course. But all these aspects that we really have to make sure continue, because we have this art form that it's our responsibility to be custodians of it while we're alive, to bring back what we've had from the past, to bring it to people now, and then prepare things that will be out there also in the future. So, you know,
Mm-hmm.
very much what we did. The orchestra played the Strauss, something from quite a long time ago, to a piece by Joan Tower, who's a composer that's still very much alive, composing. And then with Salvador, who's a bit younger than Joan Tower, who's writing music continually. So we're really, stewarding this music, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
for these times. And hopefully those kids will get the bug like we all got years ago.
Absolutely. And what was the experience like at the master class?
Oh, well, the masterclass was terrific. Beacock Music has a magnificent store. If you guys have not,
Mm-hmm.
you must go. Uh, Wonderful, attentive people uh, that made me feel at home, with a beautiful room full of people of all ages, I have to say. We had, I'm going to say, middle school, high school age kids. We had college kids from the local universities come, and it was really remarkable. And Michael from the orchestra accompanying them, doing so much sight reading, piano parts. It was really great. It really was nice, and the kids, they really seemed like they were very well prepared. They seemed receptive. Everybody seemed to enjoy the master class. We talked a lot about um, the music and interpretation, little tips to try to play a little bit better, to manage the difficulties, of the instrument, and to make music. And that was fun. And they put me on the spot. I talked a little bit about um, reeds and mouthpieces, and it's not being really put on the spot. It's what I do every day. But it was nice to also kind of communicate that in kind of a very natural way. And I think everybody got a good. Everybody seemed to get a lot out of it. It seemed like everybody stayed all the way through the end, and we really had a great time. It was really another fantastic event that was put together for me out there. That, again, another wonderful souvenir of that trip.
Yeah, it sounds like we've got a real blessing of young, dedicated musicians in this community.
I really would say so.
Mhm. So I understand that you are prepared to play a little bit for me today.
Prepared? I don't know. We'll see.
Well, we'll try.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when you had emailed me a few days ago, and I got to tell you, when everything finally settled down, I mean, the shock of everything and all, I put the clarinets down. I didn't really practice for probably a week or two. Well, easily close to 2 weeks. I just didn't touch an instrument, and then kind of started to feel like I should do something. And musicians, I don't think, people that aren't musicians, I don't know if they realize this is something you've started to do when you're, well, most of the time you start to do when you're very young, and it just kind of becomes part of your routine, or part of your life, part of, I don't want to say your DNA, but a little bit. I mean, it really gets inside of you, and you want to play. Obviously, there are periods where we don't feel like we're, but ultimately, once you get started, you come back around. And what I did, just kind of to make my compromise between not sure if I wanted to practice, or if I did, I just started playing, the very fundamentals of music, long tones and scales, arpeggios. And first couple of days, that's all I did. Maybe for an hour and a half, I did just those slowly, kind of getting back into it. And by the end of the second or third day, um, I felt like I was a little bit more recharged, and
Mhm.
my outlook got better, and I kind of decided I want to start working on some things, and let's make lemonade out of the lemons of life, and let's start working on some new things. And then you send me this email, and we want to do this thing, and would you play? And well, all the new things that I wanted to work on are certainly not ready. But this past summer, I did a recital, a small recital, kind of a thing that I had been thinking about for a while, and it was a solo recital. So it's just clarinet alone, no piano, no other instruments. And it was something I did at a wonderful space in Brooklyn called the Soapbox Theater. And I created this program, and I basically called it a map of sound and silence, which is actually what sheet music is, correct? I mean, it tells you when to play and not. Um, and I played it, and we had about 40 or 50 people there. And again, the feedback that I had was so supportive and nice. It really made me think a lot about this. And I played a variety of musics, everything from Bach to something that had been written, 6 months before for me by a good friend and composer. And so I started thinking about what am I going to play for Ashley and everybody in Vancouver. So I decided on a Piazzolla Tango Etude, but this is one that's a little bit more meditative, so nobody's going to get up and dance in their houses right now, socially distanced or not. But so here, this will be is beautifully titled Etude Number 4 by Astor Piazzolla. What I can tell you with these, I started when I first discovered these when I was a student living in Paris, and I got to know a little bit about Piazzolla. And it turns out he and I have two things in common. He lived in Brooklyn at a certain point of his life, and he went and studied in France. Well, I went and studied in France and then started to live in Brooklyn. So my connection to Astor Piazzolla. So I hope you'll enjoy this tango etude. complete with a taxi horn at the end.
That's just so lovely. It's such a treat to hear a solo clarinet just all by itself. You so rarely get that.
Well, some people might not agree. I like the kids. I don't know, but anyway, no, it's just something. And as I was playing, I lost myself. I hope I didn't leave out a couple of measures. But
Well, I wouldn't have noticed.
well, okay. If I did, someone will let us know. So I had
Probably.
that. I was out there, played bass clarinet with the orchestra, and then quickly a little clarinet. So here I wanted you to hear some clarinet, and I also have a piece on bass clarinet.
It wouldn't be complete without it, I don't think.
Thank you very much for saying that. This is the Sarabande from the Fifth Cello Suite by J.S. Bach. Bach, for me, can be very daunting, and I think for a lot of clarinet players, because who else had a period in music history end when he died? I mean, that's remarkable. I mean, Bach, the little bit I know about him, I mean, he was not the man in his time, just to make modern of it, but he certainly defined and put so many things in place for the way music was written and for everybody that followed him. So as a clarinet player, we don't grow up per se doing this. My earliest memories of Bach were in my piano proficiency class at Juilliard, and where I was mentally what's the word distraught, because for my piano final I had to learn how to play a Bach invention on piano, and I'll tell you, it was not easy. But I got through it, and thank God I did, because if I didn't, I think I'd still be there trying to finish my degree. But this is actually, I heard this, I heard Yo-Yo Ma play this on a video, and it's awful. It was some memorial for something very important, and I don't want to say the wrong one and make a mistake, but it was a tragic thing, and this was his tribute. And after I heard that, I said, I'd like to be able to play this, and this wasn't quite upbeat enough to be my encore while I was out there in Vancouver, but it was the only other thing I could think of that would be appropriate to play alone in front of people. So. So there you go. There's a little Bach on the bass clarinet. Hopefully the master himself would have enjoyed the bass clarinet stealing your cello music.
What an interesting piece.
It's, I mean, to be, it's one thing where you're playing one note at a time. There's no double stops. That's why I felt like, okay, I'm going to do this because I'm not going to impose clarinet restrictions on something Bach conceived for a completely different instrument. But it's, to me, in my ears, in my mind, it's incredibly modern.
Mm-hmm.
Though it's not. I mean, it just doesn't. Yeah. I mean,
For a minute, I almost forgot I was listening to Baroque music.
Well, if it ain't Baroque, don't fix it, right? So, oh, yeah. Is that a PBS joke? No. But it's just something, another piece that kind of speaks to me that I enjoy playing. And, every time I pick it up, it's different. Even in the middle of just now playing it for you, I was thinking, now, do I want to do this one, the repeat? Do I want to do it louder? Do we want to, it can go a lot of different ways. I think you just have to be convinced and do it. That's the thing. I mean, but that's with all music. But well, anyway, I hope everybody enjoyed my little take on this. And what I can give to you as well, a friend just sent me the audio of a piece that he wrote for me. His name is Michael Markowski. It's a piece called Tarantula. It's a play on a tarantella, for bass, clarinet, and piano. And it's something he wrote, and I ended up recording it on this CD that I should be finishing.
All right, so we ended up losing a little bit of audio here, but nothing too disastrous. So, David, you were talking about the album that Tarantula is going to be on.
Right. So the Tarantula is this album that recorded. It's all new music for bass, clarinet, and piano. And this is where Salvador's piece originally got started. And there were some other things, obviously other works on it. And I think that what we were talking about, that led me to also tell you, I gave to you from my CD, one that's about 4 or 5 years old, called The Forgotten Clarinet. There's a piece by Marc Delmas called Fantasy Italienne, which is a beautiful work, kind of two different characters. Starts very beautifully and gets a little bit more chaotic as it goes. And then the last work is the Duo de Concert by Paul Jean-Jean. Most people don't know who Paul Jean-Jean was, but clarinet players certainly do. He wrote many exercises and etudes for the clarinet. He himself was a clarinetist. And he wrote this beautiful work that I guess clarinet players wasn't expecting, because his music was a bit more modern, to be challenging, I think, to develop clarinet players, the etudes and all. But this Duo de Concert, you would think it could be Massenet. It could be something out of an opera. It's really, really very beautiful. And on that CD, I was really fortunate to play with a terrific human being, a great pianist, organist, composer friend, Peter Bannister, really a wonderful human being, and former teacher Philippe Couper played clarinet on the last one, where I played bass clarinet, and I mean, he's just a wonderful friend, a great clarinetist, known worldwide, and just a great friend. And we were able to do this, and we've done some other things together throughout the years. So I hope you'll enjoy those two pieces, and just want to say again, thank you for having me on this podcast and for doing this incredible thing in this crazy times, to be able to have your loyal fans and audience members to know that we're there, or that you're there, that you're doing something still to try to provide some form of entertainment during these really crazy times. And I just want to say thank you to everybody at the Vancouver Symphony, from Salvador to Igor to you, Ashley, and Rachel and Victoria, and my Brooklyn buddy Joe, and everybody else who I'm sure I'm forgetting. The orchestra that really truly made me feel like one of them, and really played their hearts out to make this bass clarinet concerto so great, um, and just a great community, and all the people that were interested enough to come and hear it and be part of it and support it and help get it all out there. And you guys are really doing a wonderful thing in normal times and in these crazy times. I just lastly want to wish you all good health and good and happiness, because these are crazy times. I really hope uh, from the bottom of my heart that nobody is going to get touched from this other than inconvenienced, because we still don't know where it's going, and hopefully in this epicenter I'm living in, and where you guys were, where we kind of first saw it, it's I just really hope that everybody will be okay. So that's it. But thanks again for taking the time and doing this, and I hope we get to see each other and do something together soon, Ashley.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's really been an absolute pleasure.
Wonderful. Listen, have a
All
great
right.
day. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay tuned for more VSO Encore episodes released every week. Find it on our social media, our website at vancouversymphony.org, or on the Spotify app.